I apologize. It's just that it's been raining heavily outside the last half hour or so. Everything's alright. Anyways, back to Gustaf Tenggren. It was hard to make Pinocchio convincing and alive, because of course he had a wooden soul. Yet here I have contrived to frighten him. He's hung in a birdcage in Stromboli's wagon, and you see these black shapes of marionettes hung all around like the cage like figures on a gibbet. Yes, Pinocchio is really frightened enough to show off splinters. Here is a sketch of the Blue Fairy. You see, I have simplified her face for the animators. There must be a very clear outline, a perfectly definite conception of her, because those animators must pick up and repeat her 1,000 times, in different poses and actions, and never depart from her. The original concept must be very firm to make this possible. Here is a drawing of some children looking in through the shop window where our little wooden man Pinocchio is exhibited for sale. Here the problem was to get the effect of glass, and I solved that by having some of the children's palms and cheeks and noses pressed right against the glass. You see, those white circles do it. And here are the rain effect, and here are rain effects, and moonlight effects and underwater effects. Here he is walking forward through the hold of a wrecked ship. And the shadows of the ribs mark his progress. The scenes featuring the children looking through the shop window and Pinocchio walking underwater were to have been part of the movie, but were discarded by Walt at a later stage and did not make it to the screen. In parallel, lost opportunities. In parallel to Pinocchio, Tenggren was also working on at least 2 more movies, Fantasia and Bambi. Few pieces of Tenggren's work from The Sorcerer's Apprentice and Fantasia seem to have survived, but the artist remembered that the water scenes in The Sorcerer's Apprentice took a lot of contriving to show the water really fluid and wet. On April 13, 1938, the head of Disney's background department, Tom Kodrick, sent a memo to Walt, which could have led to a much more fascinating role for Tenggren when it came to Fantasia. In thinking about the musical feature, a thought has come to my mind which seems to have many good angles to it. Inasmuch as each sequence in itself is a classic, and the picture as a whole should hit a higher level artistically, I would suggest that each sequence from the background standpoint be treated in a definite and distinct technique or style, which, in each case, would fit the particular music and mood theme of that sequence. This, I feel, would lend a great deal to the picture and a fresher handling of background subject. Going even further, I think it would be wise to commission such men as Covarrubias, Rockwell, Kent, or men of their caliber to actually do the backgrounds, or part of them to set the pace. In addition, we have at least 2 men within the organization, Tenggren and Miles, who I believe could each do an admirable job of handling a sequence. This may not at first sound very practical, but I think with the proper handling, the work of these men could be applied within practical methods. Also, in testing the idea with a couple of fellows, I realized that the men alone created a tremendous stimulus to these men, and I believe it would prove such to the whole studio. This idea would also relieve the pressure on our present background department at a time when they would possibly be snowed under with either Pinocchio or Bambi. For Bambi, in June 1938, Tenggren went on a long trip through the Sequoia and Yosemite National Parks to gather material. And as he had done in Pinocchio, he elaborated a stunningly complex opening sequence to introduce Bambi and his mother. I had to work out the camera angles, of course, explained Tenggren. That is very complicated. The camera is the bird's eye. It wheels, hovers over the forest, descends to the top foliage, giving the impression of the total wilderness, then sinks down through. It comes closer to Earth, passes big branches, all the crisscrossed obstructions down to the forest floor. The dead falls. And there at the heart of the strings, the branches draw back. These again are camera tricks. And now we focus on the little corner of a thicket where the newborn Bambi lies close against his mother's flank. In fact, Walt was very much aware of how complex Tenggren's elaborate opening sequence would have been. Walt was also conscious of how time-consuming and costly was Tenggren's extremely realistic approach to backgrounds, and he opted for the impressionistic style of Tyrus Wong, the artistic breakthrough that allowed the movie to become reality. Background artist Claude Coates remembered that, before leaving Disney, Tenggren also worked on The Wind in the Willows, a project that would be absorbed into the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad after World War II, but that Tenggren's pen and ink drawings didn't quite work for that movie. One more Disney project. By the end of 1938, after 2.5 years at the studio, Tenggren felt restless again. In a letter to Disney's former representative in the Nordic countries, Robert Hartman, who was trying to persuade him to work on a project of animated scientific pictures, Tenggren explained, I am very interested in your project of making scientific color movies and would be at your disposal not only for production of scientific films, but also for other animated color films, short ones as well as long ones. I have already settled my relationship with Disney so that I at any time can give up my work here. Although I'm presently Disney's highest paid man, I should prefer to work more independently and have a free rein for my art and my technical film knowledge. Hartman's project didn't go anywhere, and Tenggren left Disney on January 14th, 1939. After leaving Disney, Gustaf, along with Molly, spent time in Mexico, Miami, Florida, where Gustaf worked briefly at the Fisher Studio on layouts for the 1940 animated short Snubbed by a Snob, and Cape Cod before settling down in Dogfish Head on Southport Island in Maine in 1943. Over the ensuing years, Gustaf's artistic style changed radically, and he became one of the most famous contributors to the highly popular Little Golden Book series. In August 1946, an article in the Film Daily claimed that Walt Disney had asked Tenggren to come back to the studio to work on movie adaptations of Nils Holgersson and of The Life of Hans Christian Andersen, but the two projects were eventually shelved, and Tenggren never rejoined the studio. He was, however, involved in one last Disney project. In 1956, the Saturday Evening Post was about to release the first installment of Walt's biography by Diane Disney Miller and Pete Martin. It needed a cover featuring Walt and his characters. To execute the cover painting, the Post needed an artist who could accurately depict Disney's famous creations, and one who could handle the quite different job of portraying the cartoonist himself. The Post's art editor, Ken Stewart, had long admired Tenggren's children's illustrations, and he tracked him down at Dogfish Head. The resulting cover, which showed Walt riding on his train with his most famous characters, was vintage Tenggren and a beautiful homage to Gustaf's former boss. Tenggren passed away after a full and successful life on April 6, 1970. To be continued with one last artist.